So I want to offer to you what I believe is the most powerful counter-narrative progressives have ever had against that brutal logic. You might not agree with me right away. Please bear with me. Here it is. Our current economic model is not only waging war on workers, on communities, on public services, and on social safety nets. It's waging a war on the life support systems of the planet itself, the conditions for life on Earth. I'm talking about climate change, and it's not just another issue to be tacked on to a list of other issues that you have to worry about. Climate change is a civilizational wake-up call. It's a message spoken in the language of fires, floods, storms, and droughts, telling us that we need an entirely new economic model, one based on justice and sustainability. It is telling us that when you take, you must also take care. You must also give back. That there are limits past which we cannot push, hard limits. That our future health lies not in digging ever deeper holes to get at the harder and harder to reach fossil fuels, but digging deeper and deeper within ourselves to understand how all of our fates are interconnected. It's a big task. And one last thing. We need to make that civilizational shift yesterday, because our emissions are going in the exact wrong direction and there's very little time left. We certainly don't have time for another Harper majority. We need to make this shift by the end of the decade. Now, I know that talking about climate change can be uncomfortable for those of you who work in the extractive industries or in manufacturing sectors producing high-carbon products like cars and planes. I also know that despite these personal fears and those real risks, that both the CAW and the CEP have adopted all kinds of great climate policies and in fact have been visionary in the international labor scene. And this isn't some recent conversion. CEP fought for the Kyoto Protocol way back in the 1990s when their American counterparts were doing no such thing. And the CAW has been pushing the big three automakers to see past carbon-intensive vehicles for many years. Dave Coles got arrested protesting the Keystone XL pipeline. That was heroic. So you're building on a tradition. So the case I want to make to you is that climate change, when its full economic and moral implications are understood, is in fact the most powerful weapon progressives have ever had to fight for equality and social justice. But before we can really understand that, we have to stop looking away from the climate crisis, which is, I think, something we all do, which is not the same as denying it outright, like the right does. But it's another kind of denialism. It's, just letting yourself sort of sneak a peek at a scary headline and then kind of moving on because you can't really deal with the implications of it. And we all do that. We all do that. But I think once we stop looking away and once we let ourselves absorb the fact that the Industrial Revolution that led to our society's prosperity has now changed the Earth itself, then something really radical happens. Now, first of all, I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of scary numbers, though I could remind you that the World Bank, which is hardly a bunch of pinkos, says that we're on track now for 4 degrees of warming in my son's lifetime. I could tell you that the International Energy Agency, again not a protest camp of green radicals, says that the World Bank is being too optimistic, and we're actually on target, if we keep with business as usual, on target for 6 degrees of warming this century with, and I quote, catastrophic implications for us all. And that is an understatement because we have seen the effects of warming below 1 degree. That's what we're living with now. And we know what that looks like. 97% of Greenland's ice sheet melted last summer. As my friend Bill McKibben says, we've taken one of the great features of the planet and we've broken it. And then there are all the extreme weather events. We don't really have summer anymore. We have disaster season. And I've talked to a lot of people on the left, a lot of friends on the left, about why they tend to look away. Not deny outright, but why they look away. And one of the reasons they give is that if they were to fully wrap their heads around this issue and adopt it as their own and say this isn't the environmentalist problem, it's all of our problem, they said, well then I would have to stop everything else that I was doing because it's so big. And my message to you is that the exact opposite is true. Not only don't you have to stop your crucial work, fighting austerity, fighting the cutbacks, fighting the attacks on the public sphere, fighting attacks on workers, but we need to double down on those fights because we absolutely cannot afford to lose those battles. Because we need these public institutions, those jobs, that social solidarity in an era of climate change more than we have ever needed them before. So it's not about dropping anything. It's about understanding that climate change makes our battles all the more pressing. Far from trumping other issues, it vindicates what the left has been demanding for decades. In fact, climate change turbocharges our existing demands and gives them a basis in hard science. It tells us to be bold, to get ambitious, to play for keeps, because we cannot afford to lose. It inflames our vision for a better world with existential urgency. Now, I've spent a little bit of time with the sort of hard-right Americans who deny climate change. I went to this conference of climate change deniers in Washington, D.C., put on by the Heartland Institute. These are the real hard-right guys. And what becomes clear when you hang out with them is that they understand climate change better than we do. Because they sit around and say it's a socialist conspiracy. It's just a big excuse to intervene in the market and regulate corporations and do away with free trade. You know, it's just an excuse to have a planned economy. And the truth is, they're right. They're not right about the science. They're dead wrong about the science. 97% of climate scientists agree that humans are causing climate change. But they're right about the implications of the science, that if we listen to this, if we listen to the scientists and accept it, we need to do so many of the things that we want to do anyway with great urgency. The right is so appalled by this that they have to deny the science. My question is, where is the left? Where are progressives? Why aren't we understanding that this is the best argument we have ever had? So, you wanted our shock doctrine? This is our shock doctrine. If you believe that climate change is real, if you understand the urgency and the deadline that we're on, we have to tear up the free market playbook, and we have to do so, as I said yesterday. So I want to lay out what a real climate agenda would look like if we took this seriously. And when I say a real climate agenda, I don't mean the kind of stuff we've been getting from the big corporate green groups, particularly in the U.S., which is all these, they have swallowed the neoliberal ideology, and they have told us that we can deal with this crisis by changing our light bulbs, by giving more power to the market with cap and trade. They have bungled this massively. The truth is, this issue is too important to leave to the environmentalists. We need you to take it up. So, I mentioned that we're going to have to revive the public sphere. Think about it. We need subways, streetcars, clean rail systems, not only everywhere, but affordable to everyone. We need energy efficient and affordable housing along those transit lines. We need smart electrical grids carrying renewable energy. We need garbage collection, which has as its goal the elimination of garbage. And we don't just need this sort of new green infrastructure, because we've already locked ourselves into a certain amount of climate change. We're seeing that with the extreme weather. And for decades, we've been fighting to protect the public sphere, to revitalize the public sphere. But we see again and again how those decades of cuts have left us more vulnerable to extreme weather. We've seen superstorms bursting through levees. We've seen heavy rain washing sewage into lakes. We see these wildfires raging out of control and underfunded firefighters without the resources to fight them. Bridges and tunnels buckling under the new reality of heavy weather. So far from taking us away from these fights, climate change puts us right in the middle of them, but this time armed with arguments that raise the stakes significantly. It's not hyperbole to say that our future depends on our ability to win. That renewal of the public sphere, as you know, will create millions of jobs. high-paying union jobs. But it's not just about boilermakers and pipe fitters and construction workers and assembly line workers who would get these new jobs, because there are big parts of the economy that are already low carbon. They're the parts of the economy that are most disrespected, where they're facing the most demeaning attacks and the deepest cuts. These happen to be jobs dominated overwhelmingly by women, new immigrants, people of color. These are the sectors actually that we need to expand massively, and we need to take those lousy paying jobs and turn them into well-paying jobs. And we're seeing right now and you already know this, but I think what you haven't fully realized is that that's a climate policy. That's a climate policy too, and you can use the urgency of the climate crisis to make that argument. And we're seeing how this works right now with the incredible strikes of fast food workers in the United States. I mean, this has been an amazing week. And we could build on that. The fast food strikes in the U.S. could be the first uprising in a sustained rebellion fighting for both real wages and real food, one in which the health of workers and the health of society are inextricably linked. So I hope it's clear by now that I'm not talking about a few token green jobs here. This is about a green labor revolution, an epic vision for healing our country from the ravages of the past 30 years of neoliberalism and healing the planet at the same time. This transition needs to be publicly managed. And that means everything from new crown corporations in energy to a huge redistribution of power, infrastructure, and investment. A democratically controlled, decentralized energy system operated in the public interest. This agenda is increasingly being called energy democracy. Sean Sweeney from the Global Labor Institute at Cornell, which is doing really the most visionary work in this area, is here today. And he's been working with many fine unions, including the CEP, to articulate what an energy democracy agenda would look like. And it's very exciting. It's time to bring this to Canada. And the slogan, "Power to the People," is a fantastic place to start. We can't wait for governments to give us permission to start this transition, because they have locked themselves in. We're going to fight those battles. But as we fight those battles, we need to start building demonstration sites, because I think a big part of the reason why we don't really believe these alternatives are possible is that there are so many people who have never seen it in their lifetime, so they need to start seeing it. So next time there's a big factory closure, and unfortunately there will be another one, and if that factory is making fossil fuel heavy machinery, whether cars or tractors or airplanes, how about if we don't let them do it? How about if we do what workers from Argentina to Greece to Chicago are doing and occupy the factory? Sam Gindin proposed this when two of the big three went into bankruptcy, that they should be turned into green worker co-ops. Go beyond negotiating a last sad severance. Demand that the resources from companies and governments go to building the new economy that we need right here and now, whether that's electric trains, whether that's windmills. Watch that factory turn into a beacon for social movements across this country, students, anti-poverty activists, First Nations, all working together to fulfill that vision. That's what those occupied factories can become. Climate change is not your enemy. It's not a threat to your jobs. It is a threat to all of us, but it's also a tool. Pick it up. Use it to demand the supposedly impossible. All we need is a political power to make this vision a reality. If Unifor becomes a voice for a boldly different economic vision, one that provides solutions to the attacks on working people, on poor people, and the attacks on the earth itself, then there will be no worries about the continued relevance of the labor movement. You can be sure of that. You will be on the front lines of the fight for the future, and everyone else, including the opposition parties, will fall in line. And it is in this context that we are hearing shouts of enough from all quarters, this much and no further. We heard it this past week from the fast food workers, a worker in Milwaukee who went on strike holding a sign that said simply, "I am worth more." and in the process set off a debate about inequality in the United States. We heard it from the Quebec students, the courageous Quebec students who said no to a tuition increase and ended up unseating a government and sparking a national debate about the right to free education. We heard it from 4 women who said no to Harper's attacks on environmental protections and Indigenous rights and pledged to be idle no more, and in the process set off an Indigenous rights uprising around the world. And we are hearing enough from the planet itself as it fights back in the only way it can. Everywhere, life is reasserting itself, insisting that it is not overburdened. We are starting to realize that we have not only had enough, but there is enough. To quote Evo Morales, there is enough for all of us to live well. There just isn't enough for some of us to live better and better and better. To close off, I want to read an excerpt from your Constitution, from Article 2. I think some of you have heard it already, but it bears repeating. Our goal is transformative, to reassert common interest over private interest. Our goal is to change our workplaces and our world. Our vision is compelling. It is to fundamentally change the economy with equality and social justice, restore and strengthen our democracy, and achieve an environmentally sustainable future. This is the basis of social unionism, a strong and progressive union culture, and a commitment to work in common cause with other progressives in Canada and around the world. Brothers and sisters, all I would add is don't say it if you don't mean it, because we really, really need you to mean it. Thank you.